You're watching St. Mary's Celebrates Education, Writing, and the Power of Stories, brought to you by these fine sponsors.
Albert Sporting Goods, American Legion Post 323, All Glaze Equipment Rental, Capabilities, David Wabacher Attorney, Eagles 767, FCA, Fowler's TV, Freedom Marketing Strategies, Grand Lake Roofing, Guarneri's Pizzeria, Jackalope Stash, Larry Schaff Auto Sales, Laura Yelton State Farm, MHS Alumni Foundation, Miller Funeral Homes, Minster Bank, Plus One Professional Real Estate, Writer Rooters, Roots Pub, St. Mary's Foundry, Sean Barnett Electrical, Spees Chiropractic and Wellness Center, Spring Street Storage, TSC, and Varsity Lanes.
Ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for being to another great event here at the Grand, and it's very heartwarming that you all showed up. When people ask how many are coming, I said anywhere from 10 to 100. And glad that we have all of you here, and just want to give you a little bit of how this all developed, and really, all of the credit goes to Tom Pettit. A great idea, an amazing title, and something that we're going to be able to do for many years here. And we want to do it, and it was Tom's idea, right ahead of the Hall of Fame. And I think it's very fitting. And as you see, St. Mary's celebrates education, writing, and the power of stories. And we're going to get into that here real soon. Before we do, obviously we've got some shameless plugs that we have to do for other great events that are going to be here. Tomorrow night, I have to make a call. Tom wanted Thursday night, and I said, yeah, no problem. Oh, well, there was a problem because I'd already rented it to the German Sister City organization. They have a rental here from 5 to 6:30, and then they're opening up to the public this right here, a silent movie. They said, Doug, we need something where language barrier is not going to be an issue with our guests from Lenin. Silent movie, no language barrier. If you have not seen a silent movie, I beg of you to come tomorrow night to take a look at a silent movie. Our regular organist is in the state of Washington performing, so we're using for the first time a gentleman from Fort Wayne. He works at Sweetwater Music Store, if you're familiar with that at all, and we are very excited about this. They're physical comedies. You will enjoy it. Free will donation, thanks to the St. Mary's Lenin Sister City organization. Then we have a gospel patriotic group that's coming. It's a Sunday, October 13th, 4 p.m. Adults $10, students $5. Really looking forward to that. Joe Genner, he's got the sequel of Ditchman. How many saw Ditchman last year? Yeah, a good, decent amount here. So we are seeing Ditchman, the sequel, showcasing the Hodag. So make certain, I see a cast member in here, maybe there's more, but I just saw somebody that's definitely in the Ditchman. Smart, I hope we're ready for this, but they're going to do the Rocky Horror Picture Show, 11 p.m. on October 26th. So that will be fun. Any Chicago fans? Not the Cubs, and definitely nobody's going to admit being a White Sox fan. But we have the Cincinnati Transit Authority, the Music of Chicago. Their demo is incredible. It sounds just like them. The full horn section as well. And so that's November 9th. Eagles fans, we introduced this event with a little Eagles song. We have already half the tickets are sold for the entire place set up just like this. So make certain you get your tickets. McGuffey Lane celebrating their 50th anniversary going to be right here, December 7th. Exploit Deluxe, a great regional band, will be performing on Friday along with Dean Axe and Andy Klosterman. Noah Back, a good young performer that we're excited to bring to the stage, and we're ready for our event here. Want to thank Ann Vogel once again for 30 minutes of great music played on the Dick Hudson baby grand piano. Thank you, Ann. What a wonderful donation from Dick Hudson, and glad that we're able to use that. Mary Jo, one of the sponsors of this event, I got put on an email with Tom and her, and I'm like, Mary Jo, what about having your dad's piano being played as the entertainment ahead of that? And she's like, yes, and please ask Dad's music partner, Ann Vogel. And I saw Ann literally right after that email, and Ann was absolutely, yes, I will. So again, thank you. Hopefully you caught it that we ended with the alma mater, and that was all Ann. So very, very fitting. Okay, we're going to talk about Tom. I got to introduce it this way, that collectively Tom and I have published 25 books. Tom has 25 and I have 0. I do have a title for a kid's book that I want to do, but that's as far as I've actually gotten. When Tom called about this, I'm like, heavens yes, we're doing this. And when he said, you could probably get a couple more years with local authors, bring them in. I'm like, absolutely, because look at our mission. Obviously, we're restoring, preserving, promoting the historic St. Mary's Theater and Grand Opera House, transforming it into this vibrant performing arts center, serving the greater St. Mary's area for generations to come with artistic and educational opportunities. Yep, I just showed you a lot of artistic opportunities to come to, but we really are working on educational performances. Next week, I'm meeting with the PTO. I had an anonymous donor who gave a very nice donation for family and kids educational programming, and we're going to try to do one Saturday a month of educational programming right here. So very excited about that. Again, our sponsors, thanks to Mary Jo Hudson and Dr. Lynn Wallach, St. Mary's MHS Alumni Foundation, and Rider Nation Station. So part of Tom's book has this funny word in it. And when we were talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I love this song, Kyrie. 1980s song by Mr. Mister. But I found out it's not Kyrie, nor does it have anything to do with that. I have no idea how to pronounce this.
Should he say does? Carrere, carrere, carrere.
Carrere, Carrere, Carrere. So we're going to learn a bunch about Carrere with this great talk. What are his colleagues saying about this book? The power of Petter's invitation rests on his brilliant, provocative weaving of personal stories, what he calls curriculum fragments, that point to and point out the transformative bits that make up his life and, in turn, his educational journey. Those interested in engaging in self-study to improve not only their own meaning-making, but also the educational experiences of others need to read this book. If you didn't buy it coming in or ahead of time, you can buy it on the way out, and I'll bet afterwards you're going to definitely want to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Tom Petter, publisher of 25 books, many, many articles, great accolades at Miami University. I got to know Tom. Tom didn't know who I was, but I got to know Tom because he was my childhood hero. His father, who you'll read a lot about in the book, baptized me, went to the same church as Tom, and I loved watching Tom on the McBroom Gymnasium basketball floor. He's 8 years older than I am, and so I was an 8, 9-year-old little punk kid just adoring everything that Tom Petter did in the church and in the community and on the basketball floor. So it is my pleasure, great, great honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Tom Petter.
next to the speaker. Doug Spencer. So Doug and I obviously have been friends for a long time, and not everything I did on the basketball court at McBroom was that great, but I loved playing there, and kids would come up and talk to us at practice after the games. Doug was probably one of them, and I really enjoyed that, especially if we won. And I really appreciate that intro. I spent a lot of time in sports. I did a lot of stuff in sports. I wound up not really staying in them except for to coach my own kids in youth athletics. But sports, I must say, I think is a really important educational thing that we do in the United States relatively well at all levels. And it gives children, I think, a way to express themselves in and out of school, to be healthy and fit to a certain degree, and to learn things about the world with other children and adults in a caring way, hopefully, that helps them grow and become the kind of people that we'd like them to be. So I really appreciate Doug mentioning that. And I'll say a little bit more about sports in the talk. You came out to a talk tonight on a Wednesday night with the title Curriculum Fragments. And when I got that title together for this book, I felt like, well, let me just be honest about the book. I think it's really good. Like, I've been doing this a long time. I've been writing and working at writing and coaching writing, teaching students to write under young children in high school. Started as a high school teacher, undergraduates, graduate students, master students, the hardest to teach, doctoral students to write. And I've known all the way through that I'm a growing writer. I feel like every attempt I'm making, I'm trying to get better and learn from my own mistakes. And I think this is a really good effort. It is my 25th book. It's a little bit like 50 Christmases, but it's really specific to some things about education that I think anybody who reads it, who's gone to school and who's grown up in a community can resonate with. So I hope you'll take a look at it and read it. I have complete control here tonight with this. A lot of times things break down in talks like this, but I have really good confidence in Doug that we're in good shape. I also have a second screen here that I can look at the writing and maybe keep my place. I want to keep my place and make it through the talk and not keep you too late tonight. But I really just want to use the screen as a prompt for what I'd like to say and not read from the slides. You don't want to go to a great public university like Miami and then have the professor just read the slides. I mean, that's not what we're there for. Like, we're actually teaching and interacting with students, trying to help them become something. I have to say a couple thank yous. So Doug, and of course Mary Jo and Lynn, thank you for sponsoring. You're significant sponsors of this event. And Mary Jo and I go way back to our neighborhood, Perry Street, and that's spring, of course. Gosh, I've been a little late. The streets come back, but it's spring. And we ran the neighborhood together for many years. We each had lots of friends, but we almost always wound up in a Titanic football game at the Baptist vacant lot on the corner, right? And we're friends all through school and college and through today, and I really appreciate her life and times and her great contributions to society, and of course tonight to this event. The panelist, Mr. Grindrod, was my junior in high school, junior year teacher of English, and he tells the story, he might tell it later, about how much I liked Thurber. I never saw it coming, and that day in class I couldn't stop laughing in class, and it was totally inappropriate. I knew it. I was totally out of line, and instead of yanking me out of class by the year, he said, "Tommy, why don't you take a break and laugh it out in the hallway?" It was just really lovely. It's really good pedagogy. And because I really, really admire Thurber's subtlety, humor. I just really liked it. And he said a few things in that short story that really got me. And I've always felt like maybe I'll write one line like that in a book that people will laugh at and really enjoy. We'll see if you feel that way about anything in Curriculum Fragment. The sponsors, friends, there are friends in the audience tonight. Most of them, many of you are going to get called out tonight in the talk, so just hang in there. There's a few sticky notes. So I've been using this metaphor of sticky when I'm talking about Curriculum Fragments. And the sticky part of the stories of our lives, the sticky parts are related to the stories that we can't let go of. They just populate our brain and our hearts over and over again. We can't get rid of them, almost like a recurring dream. I have one. I'm not going to tell about it tonight. It's really frightening. It's like a recurring dream or something you think of when you're in trouble or you're happy, you're joyful. You think of a memory or something someone said to you. I think of these things as seeds of experience that are fragments. It's not the whole story, but it's the story about something. And I think our educational experience, our lives, are built on these significant but often disparate stories. They're significant, sticky stories. So I used to come here to this theater, and it looks better than it ever did. And Doug and the theater committee have to be thanked widely for that. And I know Doug knows how I feel about it. But when I came in tonight, it was my first time in the finished building, as finished as far as it is now. And I always thought the relief historical pictures were bigger, right? Like everybody who grew up here feels that way probably. But they're stunning. And the building is stunning. And I can imagine this is a great turnout tonight. But can you imagine this place filled with people clapping and roaring? I mean, what a great place to be. We used to come here with the Burke boys, and probably Robbie was in tow too, on Saturday afternoons, probably in the 70s. That might have been the heyday of the end of the line for the Saturday matinees for kids. Cartoons, maybe a feature. I know I ran out of one because it was so scary. I didn't have far to run to the parsonage, but that was quite an event on Saturdays in St. Mary's to see all the kids with their bikes parked out front without locks on them. Just left your bike out front and it was there later, and you just rode home on it. It's a remarkable experience for a kid growing up in a town like this, to get to go to the movies, to sit in the balcony, to not be under parental supervision all the time. I'm going to say a word about the neighborhood in a few minutes, and Mark Davis and I both know how much supervision there was in the neighborhood, surveillance at every level. And then in 1986, I was courting my wife of 37 years, Christine Cook, and we were, I think it was like home on a weekend in the summer of '86. I was just getting ready to propose to her. I didn't know if that was going to go well or not. I decided a week or two before to come home. We were both at home here in St. Mary's. The theater was open, and they were playing Aliens. And we had seen like the trailers for it, and it looked really like a great action movie, and it would be maybe something we'd like to see. I was thinking something like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T. Something like, like maybe I could even put my arm around her in the theater and go watch the movie. And after 10 minutes in this theater, she was gripping my arm so hard. I'm like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And she bolted out of this theater because the first thing that popped out of the first belly, that was it. I mean, we just couldn't stand it. I can remember, like, out front, I'm like, I hate scary movies. She's like, why did you bring me to this? She said yes the next weekend. I don't know how that happened, but it turned out pretty good. It wasn't even one of those romantic scary things, it was just scary. That happened right here. I'm going to say a few words about, so these are reflections and fragments and thoughts about my St. Mary's. My St. Mary's isn't your St. Mary's. We don't have the same experiences or people in our lives, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how St. Mary's framed and shaped me and on my educational journey. That's what Curriculum Fragments is about. It's about reflecting on your educational journey and trying to understand the pivotal moments, what they mean. That's the book. So, neighborhoods in town were important. I could ride my bike anywhere in town when Mrs. Lehman, Norma Lehman, made a rule that, it was way before I was 8 years old, you had to be 8 to ride your bike in the street. And I wrote in another book that I got my bike taken away from me because I was caught riding in the street. Who caught me? Like, who ratted me out? Mom's like, it doesn't matter. You were riding your bike in the street, and you know that Mrs. Lehman's rule. I loved Mrs. Lehman. She's a fantastic person, the whole Lehman family. But she got my bike for a week. We lived in neighborhoods in this town, and back in those days, the late 60s and early 70s, I rode my bike everywhere in town. And by the time I was riding my bike in the street, I never said where I was going. My mom, Marietta, Dad was at work, and Mom was mostly at home. She might say something lovely and kind to me in the morning, like, what are you going to do today? I'm like, I don't know. I'll probably get on my bike. And I got on my bike and I went, as long as I was home by 5. And I think Mrs. Burke had a bell. Did Mrs. Burke have a dinner bell? She rang that bell, and my mom would say, if you're not home by the time Mrs. Burke rings that dinner bell, you're in trouble, young man. And I was always home by the dinner bell. Of course, I was starving, right? Because I'd been out playing all day. Neighbors, like Mary Jo, Mark Davis is in the audience. He came out tonight. Tom Bensman was a great friend of my brother's. Joe Hurlbert's in the audience. Somehow he became mayor. I love that. That's supposed to be funny, because Joe's always, well, of course you know, I grew up in a household where sports was important, all the way up to my dad. And Joe, of course, was a superstar football player who played at Toledo, and I was just in awe of the kids coming through the house all the time. Making my life better. Nobody ever picked on me or hurt me, which I really appreciate, because they were really big people. The Burks, of course, I've written about this a lot, but the Burks had a beautiful basketball court before they expanded their back of their property there. And I played basketball at all hours on that court. It was one of the most beautiful places. Mary Jo and I played there hours and hours together. She became a great high school basketball player. I played in college. It was just foundational. And not only playing the game was really important to me, but it was also about the kids that walked through there and played with me and had fun, laughed, and got in trouble. These things happen in neighborhoods and sports and recreation in schools, and I'm going to focus a little bit on teachers here. Were very important. When I was growing up, there were 7 or 8 schools in town. Bunker Hill is still alive up on the corner of Wayne and Indiana. You drive by there now, and there's a beautiful home on the corner with lots of green grass, but that was a big brick building that housed 6 grades, and I went through all 6 grades at Bunker Hill and loved that school. Moulton School is gone now, right? Moulton. Noble, still going. Not as a school, but as a community center, right? East-West School, Holy Rosary School. I have stories about all these places that I inhabited, including a game I lost in 8th grade to the 8th graders who became my teammates in high school. I'm still upset about it. Can you see it? I'd be on one knee if I didn't have 2 artificial hips. McBroom Gym, of course, McBroom, and Memorial High School. I could tell stories about all these places, but I'm going to focus on Bunker Hill for a few minutes. And I got to keep going because I could go all night. And there's a bigger point here, and that is that education's taking place in all these settings. As long as there's some aspect of moral growth happening. John Dewey, the great American education philosopher, said, you could teach a burglar to be a better burglar, but that's not education. That's miseducational, because the ends are not moral. Stealing from others is not moral. So you can be a great burglar, but you're not a great student. You're just a thief, right? I pointed at Kuffner, but I didn't mean that. Sorry about that, Kurt. Not a thief. Sorry about the joke, got me off point. But if the ends are moral, education is typically happening. Growth is happening. So in all these places, the home, the church, the place of worship, the school, and the neighborhood, education is often taking place. And probably we're living through it, maybe not paying attention to it. I have to admit, at the time even, I think I was paying attention to it. I had a prompt from my doctoral advisor at one of my early courses at Indiana University, where I took my PhD. And the faculty member's name was Norm Overley. He's a very dear friend of mine. He's the focus of chapter 9 on loving. And Norm's 92, and a book came out, called him. I said, I wrote about you in the book. I'm going to bring you a copy. I'd like to talk about it with you. He got the book. Ahead of the trip over to Bloomington to see him, I said, have you had a chance to look at the book? And he said, he took a big, deep breath. I skipped to the parts about me and read them all. And I said, I laughed, and I said, that's what I would have done. And I said, what about the rest of it? Oh, I'll get to that, he said. But he really liked the parts about him, and some people who I've written about. I didn't name everybody in the book. It's one of the things about this type of research and this type of work, like writing about people and outing them without their permission. I don't think it's not very moral. It's not the right thing to do. But he knew that I was going to write about him and his contributions to my education. And this is the big one, because this prompt led to an article I wrote for the Journal of Teaching Education. It was titled Miss Connor and Bunker Hill School. And some of you know Catherine Connor was a 44-year teacher. I think all of them were at Bunker Hill. I'm not sure, but I think they were. And she was a well-known first grade teacher. She taught me how to read. Back then, reading was taught in the first grade, not in kindergarten or H2. First grade. Most people didn't worry about us reading until we were 6. There were other things to do, like play with Mary Jo in the neighborhood. My mom was very interested in me reading, though. When I was 9, 10, 11, in the summers, she said to me, I think you ought to be reading more in the summer. And I'm like, I have a game with the Burks today, I have a basketball thing, I have a thing. She's like, here's a book. She handed me King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. She thought I'd be interested in that. I resisted it, pushed it aside. Maybe after playing baseball all day, I opened it up and started reading. I'm like, it's pretty good. And she got me started on Alan Eckert's Frontiersman series, the great writer out of Piqua. So there's a lot of things to do. And Miss Connor was really interested in us reading well all through first grade. And I think she did a nice job with that. Am I there, Dean? I want to say a few things about her. I'm moving around too much, I'm sorry. I'm having too much fun. I need to sober up and be serious like a professor. Miss Connor taught first grade, and there were some things I remember about her, and the things she did, I think they're informative for what I'm talking about here in terms of fragments. She one time, I'll never forget this. Remember when it used to snow in November and December in St. Mary's? Remember that? In the 1960s and 70s? One day she came in and most of us had assembled already. We're sitting down and taking off our coats and galoshes or whatever we had on, boots. It had snowed the night before, maybe a 4 to 6 inch covering. And she was taking off her boots very deliberately. And she looked up at the class and she said, did anybody feel and hear the crunch of the snow on the way to school? And we all raised our hands and started yelling out things that we thought about that. She listened and said things back to us. When I hear the crunch of the snow, I hear joy. Like things like that. Can you imagine being 6 and hearing those things? Right? Like, isn't that what first grade teachers do? Mary Jo, were you there? We also had a squirrel's nest on the tree outside the room, and we all took turns feeding the squirrels, not really a great idea actually, but feeding the squirrels with this long pole, like out the window. You got to load the feeder and then feed the squirrels. And getting to feed the squirrels was a big deal when it was your turn. And I remember doing that. It was really monumental, like you remember these things, at least I did. We had a number line, maybe 1 through 25, I don't know. Could be 1 through 100. She was really, really concerned that we kept the number line clean. I didn't understand what that was about, but I did it. I kept it clean. If I wrote on it or colored it, I tried to wipe it off. I didn't want to upset Ms. Connor and her plan for me, which was obviously tidiness. And then, of course, reading. Along the way, I was using, in that story and in my own life's work, I was using what Bill Pienaar calls curere. And Doug got the pronunciation right on the internet. It's the root word of the word curriculum, and it means the course to be run. So curere is about taking stock of your life's journey through education and reflecting on the meaning of past events, current events in your life, perspectives on the future that you might be dreaming of, and then taking stock of those stories, those fragments, and analyzing them. Taking stock of your life and where you're headed. The key to all of it is reflection. So in the past 15 years or so, I've been focusing on reflection in almost all of my work and teaching some of my students who are interested in this as a research method to do the same. Some of my students have written amazing dissertations using the Carrere method to story their life journeys in education. And I've already mentioned sticky. I call these things curriculum fragments, and I contend, it's not very scientific, but I contend that and I don't really care about the science of it, I care about the feeling of it. They're the fragments that form the essence of our lives. I almost went into a Paul Anka lyric there, but I resisted it. Reflecting on my early life and experience in education became a big part of the book project. So I wanted to mention some of my St. Mary's teachers, though not all of them. I wrote their names up here. These are the ones I think who helped me become a writer. So Mrs. Ruyer, kindergarten, Ms. Connor, first grade, Mrs. McAvoy, Shirley, second grade, Mrs. Cook and Mrs. Hayes split the day in third grade, Mrs. Kirby, fourth grade, Mrs. Kemp, fifth grade, Mr. Andrews, Burton, sixth grade. What a lineup of great teachers in my opinion. Miss Duffy, Mrs. Shelby, 7th and 8th. And what I was going to say about Mrs. Shelby tonight, and she's not here, is I have a copy of the book I wrote for her and her class. It was the first book I ever wrote, so it's actually 26. Not to brag. That experience of writing that book for her was the beginning of it all. I can trace that all the way back to there. There are all kinds of things that happen along the way, but that was really key and pivotal. And I love Mrs. Shelby for that and everything else. Mr. Long, Mrs. McIntosh, Mr. Grindrod, Mr. Howard. And then I starred these people, Mr. Young, Jake, math, Mr. Hirschberger, not social studies, basketball. Mr. Brenneman, life and basketball, because I spent time before Dad died, at the parsonage, we had that long driveway with the basketball hoop on the carport, and Mr. Brenneman lived across the street with the Baptist pastor for a year when he was first settling in St. Mary's. And I knew he was one of the basketball coaches, and I was in 6th, 7th grade, and I showed off for him. Every time he came out of the house, I grabbed my ball, and I was shooting from long range. Hey, coach, you want to come shoot? He always obliged and said hi to me, etc. And then all of a sudden, he's one of my high school basketball coaches, and he's the only person who was ever honest with me about my speed. I was fast. I would probably say quick. I like to think of myself as quick. It was a good weapon to have as a point guard. And he came up to me before the big Ottawa-Glandorf game in 1981. It was a league championship game. And he said, Tommy, always called me Tommy, not Putt like the Burks and like almost everybody else in the room, not Putt. Tommy, I just want you, we're shooting free throws, end of practice, everybody's tired. He never came up to me and said anything like this. Handed me the ball, don't take a shot. I want you to know that Ron Shoemaker for Ottawa Glandorf is really fast. And I looked at him, I said, so? He said, no, I mean faster than you. And I said, no, he's not faster than me. And he was. He was the fastest player I've ever played against at all levels, even on blacktops in cities. Ron Shoemaker absolutely ate me for lunch that night, that weekend. And I owe it all to Mr. Brenneman. And the last person on there was Mr. Sabeck. You know Larry Sabeck? Doggone it. Doug, I'm sorry I'm messing this up. Am I ruining the show? Trying to get it to stay. What?
It's your show.
So I think what most of you know, Dad died in 1976. By the time it was time to get out of the parsonage in the spring of 1977, and Mom was already talking about putting her degree to use. She'd never used her occupational therapy degree in 30 years, but she kept it alive, correspondence courses. She always said, it's important for me to keep this going. You never know what's going to happen. Isn't that good planning, right? And it was another piece of evidence that education matters. And her University of Kansas degree, which not many women had in 1950, she put that to work in 1978-79 at Plano Memorial when she got a job as an occupational therapist. She told me flat out, I just want you to know, we're moving back. And I said, well, that doesn't sound great. You know, things are going pretty well here for me. I'm like 14. Got a girlfriend, playing sports. Yeah, but it'll be easier for me to get to work, etc. So that spring, I had a good spring, and Coach Sabeck asked me to come up and play on the varsity. That team won the WBL championship. He needed more speed in the outfield. He wasn't happy with the outfield play, and he batted me leadoff as a freshman. And there were a lot of juniors who weren't happy about that. But when that happened and I led her on that team and we won that title, that was it. I mean, I don't think Mom, she said, we can't move now. I'm like, I know. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't set out to beat out all the juniors who were mad at me and would like to murder me after every game. It wasn't that way. But that's what happened, Mr. Sabeck. So one of the things I write in the book is that some of these things, when you look back, they can be nostalgic. It can almost make you feel homesick and/or, pining for the past. Maybe a past that's not there anymore. And sometimes looking back like that can lead you down what a great pastor, Bruce Bischel, told me in a sermon many decades ago when I was first living in Oxford. The devil's riddle is looking back with regret at things that didn't happen. If only, if only, if only, right? So what would have happened if Mr. Sabeck hadn't called me up to the varsity? I would never have played. I would have gone to Bath. Bath Wildcats. That doesn't sound right. I wouldn't be standing here. These are projects forward. These are positive things that happen, not regrets. But you can get caught in regrets when you start looking back. So anybody who wants to go down this path and start looking back, they feel like there's sticky things they want to talk about or they want to work on. I want to encourage you to do that. But don't do it with regret. You understand what I'm saying? It's a really important distinction to make, I think, when you're talking about your educational journey. Oh, look at these people. I'm out of time almost. Mrs. McAvoy, second grade, encouraged me to write. I told her after reading a short bio, a grade-appropriate bio of Lincoln, learning about Appomattox and his assassination, I said, I think I'd like to write a play about that. And she said, okay, Tommy, what's your plan? And I said, I'm gonna write the play. That was my plan. And she said, well, there are other things that happen with a play. You usually have a cast, and if you write the play, you can do something with the play, but a thing that you could do with it is perform it. I said, I think I'd like to perform it. Did you like to get actors? She helped me get actors and all the grades, put together an all-school show that we did in the basement of Bunker Hill, probably in a week's time. Like, that kind of educational experience doesn't come along that often. Mary Jo, were you in it? We did. I'm going to bring that up. Mrs. Shelby, I wrote my first book for her. Mr. Long, freshman year, was the blizzard of '78, and Mr. Long had a journal writing assignment. He wrote a journal entry every Monday, so you had 10 or 15 or 12 or 16 or 18 or 20 entries. I still have those entries. It was a great assignment. I really appreciate it. I've mentioned already Mr. Grindrod's Thurber episode and all I learned from him about writing. And I wrote for him and then really appreciated that. Mr. Howard taught many lessons. I didn't know all these things about commas. I never cared about any of it, really. And then Mr. Howard, right beneath that beautiful picture of the 51 basketball team that was so beautiful, I just admired that. And then I turned to him, and he'd say, and then the comma goes here when you have this, it's a serial comma. It comes after the second item in a series. I'm like, I think I like serial commas. And I've been marking them on my students' papers for 40 years. Mr. Howard. So I'm not making fun. Like, you don't remember everything about the class. You can't look back and remember everything about sophomore English or a college. You don't remember those things. You remember the things that stick. And those things make you. And they're important to attend to. And if they're good, to conjure them up and put them to work. That's what I'm encouraging my students to do. So all these examples, I think they yield questions like, do we do creative things in classes with students? I had a whole school, 7 years of classes at Bunker Hill where I was encouraged to be creative and maybe think outside the box of my own little world. Do teachers have the time and know-how to challenge and extend? And do we create opportunities for children to ask the hard questions? I was always asking hard questions. What I'm doing with Curriculum Fragments is, and life experiences and life processes, is I'm trying to talk about how these things all fit together. So I'm building on a great theorist from the late 1960s, Louise Berman's work, New Priorities in the Curriculum, a great book. It's about life processes, and one of her goals was to help teachers shift from thinking just about subject matter to thinking about things that are life-oriented. So they were all gerunds, words like becoming, decision-making, growing, orienting, etc. I liked her book. I didn't necessarily like the intentionality of it. I liked how it was descriptive of things that are educational that we can name. So I started thinking about how to name some of the fragments I was thinking about, and I came up with 7 that form the core of the book. Losing, knowing, forgiving, relating, hoping, growing, and loving. I said that part about Louise. But my idea isn't about transforming curriculum in schools, but transforming the way people think about curriculum, about their life experiences. I have to go quicker and get to the panel. These reflective curriculum fragments, these sticky stories, drive who we are, what we want to be, and who we are becoming. Many of the stories in the book are from my learning here, and I can't escape them. One example is about relating, and I want to tell quickly a story about Mrs. Kemp. Pat Kemp was my 5th grade teacher, and the spring that Dad had his first heart attack, something was going on at the house. Something was going on at the house. There was some kind of appointment or something, and my mom asked Mrs. Kemp to take me to lunch. And I agreed to go because we were going to snack time. Who didn't love going to snack time? I want to go there right now. And we went to snack time, and Mrs. Kemp was my teacher and neighbor. I played around the neighborhood with Buzz, her son, and I knew her well. Knew her from church. And that lunch was really helpful. We talked about baseball. We talked about the neighborhood. And she wanted to know how I was doing. It wasn't rapid fire, buddies in the room talk. It was an adult and a child just talking. And one of the things we came up with on the way home in the car, you remember Mrs. Kemp had that convertible? I don't know if you know this, but she had one of those big Ford convertibles with the top down. We drove back to school with the top down. I love that. I'd never done that before. And she said, Tommy, I was thinking about Hank Aaron and how he didn't set the home run record last season in Cincinnati. I was at those final games with Joe and Dan and Robbie. Do you remember that? We were hoping to see Henry Aaron hit number 714 in Cincinnati, and he went 0 for 8 in a doubleheader. You remember? The last two games of 73. So in 74, Henry was chasing the Babe's record. And she said in the car, I was thinking about playing the radio on whatever day it was, April 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th, in class and listening to see if we can hear the home run. And I said, I think that's a great idea. I'd never heard a teacher say something like that. Let's listen to baseball during class. She probably did something great and creative educationally, but we also listened to the game. It was Marty Brenneman's first call, and Henry Aaron hit pitch off Jack Billingham in the first inning for a 714th home run. And I just want to say, it's serendipitous, isn't it, or something like that, that someone, like an adult, cares about you in their life and then talks about something you care about when you're at your lowest. You know your dad is perishing. Right? Good stuff. Oh, I never wanted to do that. Tear up. This story, of course, and most of the stories in the book challenge the notions we have about, what's school for? What are teachers for? How do they behave? What do they do? What's their good? And I'm arguing that it's way more than the English. It's way more than the commas. English was my love in school. Mr. Grindrod knows that. But it wasn't it. The it was me becoming. That's the curriculum. And that's the curriculum of every single class. It's about the student in the seat becoming something new. And the teacher's on the way with that journey, in my opinion. And it's not shorting the fact that a really great English teacher who helped someone find their way toward writing knows something about English. Doesn't hurt anything. In fact, it may be central. Maybe. I'm not so sure. Mrs. Kemp, Mr. Grindrod, Miss Connor, Mrs. McAvoy, on and on and on, were the kinds of people who helped shape me into a person, not just a writer or a thinker or a scholar. To that end, hopefully there's some teachers in the audience. I want you to know that I think teachers need freedom to move, they need time to reflect, and they need support to truly engage students. Until they have these things, teachers may view the idea of life processes or reflecting as just another thing to do. I understand that. But I think if they think about these things on a certain level, they can become transformative and not just more work to do. I hope that people who read my book are inspired to look more deeply within, to track their life experiences and make judgments with reason and feeling toward wholeness, toward more joy, toward maybe even seeing the world like it's filled with awe, like this is a beautiful thing, like getting an invitation to speak in your own hometown about a book you wrote, like that is really beautiful thing, right? It's beautiful. These things give us hope and purpose in life. My theory is that we're all sitting on curriculum fragments about education, our life journeys, some of which, if told, might reveal truths about us and our education that would be really, really helpful, not only to us, but maybe to others. And if you read the book, I think you'll have maybe some sticky fragments will pop. And you might think of some things like these questions, like, I remember when X, Y, and Z happened. That's already happened tonight with some of you in the room talking with you about things. That reminds me of when, I wonder if I could. And what am I going to do right now? What am I going to do now that I understand X? Maybe that process has already started with some of you. Maybe it's already been working in you. Maybe now it's the time to tell it, and I came up with this. This is kind of weak. Talk it, write it, live it. That's what I'm trying to do with this book and with my career in education. So thank you. Thanks for letting me go over. Doug, thank you. And I think we should have the panel up.
Alrighty. It's time to bring up the panel, and Tom, I'll take the clicker back. The first panelist that I'm going to introduce, the oldest of Charles and Janet Spencer. Claim to fame is she was one amazing big sister. To me, she also was well known for her acrobatic skill set, which then led her to gymnastics, performing gymnastics on a full-ride scholarship to Eastern Kentucky University, the home of the Colonels. The first state champion. Oh, I blew it. I was going to say combined, Laura and I have one state championship under our belt. And she is a longtime St. Mary's business owner with State Farm Insurance downtown. She is instrumental in the SMART organization for doing a lot of great things to benefit St. Mary's and the downtown retail shops. And Friday night, she is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So please welcome Laura Yelton to the stage. And our second panelist, John Grindrod, aka the Grinder. John was born in Chicago, moved to Lima at the age of 7, still lives in Lima, and he was an LCC grad, Miami University, and also has a master's from the University of Dayton. Combined, Tom and the Grinder have 27 published books. I'm not counting your Mrs. Shelby book as a published book yet. So the Grinder has authored 2 books. He writes as a columnist, weekly columnist for the Lima News, wrote for a magazine for a dozen years, and he is the proud father of 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters. I had the dubious distinction of not having Grinder once as an English teacher, but twice. And before all of you fear that I failed, I did not. My sophomore year, the Grinder taught 1 period of sophomore English. And I was one of the fortunate individuals that had the Grinder the very last period of the day as a sophomore English student. And then my junior year, I had the Grinder the first period of the day. It's like it never stopped. And I am a much better individual for working under the great guidance of Mr. John Grindrod. So please welcome the Grinder to the stage as well.
I told Doug not to come back a third time. I was out of focus. I told him everything I knew.
There were actually stories my senior year. He was going to teach senior classics. I took English 12. No lie. Oh, so this is going to be a great, wonderful evening. All three of us have had the opportunity to read curriculum. We'll sit you, just scoot. One more. Yep.
Okay.
All three of us had the wonderful opportunity to read Dr. Tom Petter's book, Curriculum Fragments, and Laura and John are going to do most of the questions. I'll interject every once in a while. And Grinder, let's start off with you, of your most riveting top priority question of Dr. Tom Petter.
Okay, Tom, this is a little bit of a long one here, but I want to make sure that in the course of the question I also give props where they belong.
Thank you. That's nice.
After reading chapter 6 on the life process relating,
Yeah.
the reflections on your father and the impact he had on you over a tragically brief period of time were, I thought, beautifully written. Within those stories, two moments stood out for me. One, the great care that Howard Henry Petter took in teaching you how to receive a thrown ball with cupped hands. And two, the way your father handled your boorish behavior during a Little League game. When the first, on being taught how to properly catch a ball, has easily connectivity to so much in the classroom where attention is paid to process and detail, I want to focus really on the second that related to your behavior, which was less than stellar during a Little League baseball game. It was such a beautifully layered message that you delivered, I thought, and it was through the words of your father. After he witnessed the game and saw you stomping around on the mound and throwing your glove down when some of your teammates were making errors,
Sorry, Galen.
he, beginning with the future consequences, he told you, should you ever act that way again on any field or court of play, that you would not be allowed to play again. The immediate consequential price that was going to be paid for the behavior he witnessed is when he made you load the bike actually in the back of the vehicle and walk home, a very long walk you mentioned.
Larkin Field, out by Goodyear.
Yeah.
And his
At night.
Yeah, and his making you take that long walk home, and then despite the severity of the words and actions, when you finally arrived home, you saw him watching television in the family room there. And it was his tacit acceptance of your actions, and without one further word about your unacceptable behavior, he showed you that you were still loved and would always be loved without equivocation. As you wrote, not another word was ever spoken of the incident. Question: how can Dad's method of handling your unfortunate moment translate to the classroom?
That's a great question. Can I say something about Dad first?
Sure.
And the end is, how does it translate, right? He never spoke of that again, but I didn't change a whole lot. I mean, I still was boorish sometimes. Of course, it came from it was genetic. Dad was highly competitive. And my grandmother, Luetta, some of you may have known her, moved to town in the mid-'70s, and she almost got kicked out of McBroom Gym for screaming at the Defiance players, profanities from the fourth row. And she was a God-fearing, lovely woman, but she really didn't like the Defiance players. And I had gotten in foul trouble, and the referee went in the stands and told her she would be removed forcibly if she didn't stop. And Marietta was so mad. That went on for months. Mother, no more. Dad did things always, because some of you knew him. He probably married some of you, married buried people in your family, me, baptized you, Dougie baptized you, baptized me. He meant it when he said it. Like, as a father, I've said things I don't really mean. You know, made threats, or like, you could do this. If this happens, it's deterministic stuff. Like, these are the ends if you do this. But I knew he meant it. And he never worried that he'd see me do that again. I never did that again in front of him. Sorry, Galen. But when you teach, the students in the classroom may not have the same goals that you have. I've learned that all the way through, teaching students in grade school all the way through doctoral studies. And I want to address them at all times, and I think I've almost always done this. Sometimes when I was a basketball coach, I was and it wasn't very nice to students sometimes, but I want to treat them with respect, like they have something to offer, even if they're misbehaving or off course. I wanted to have some grace, like give them time to get it right, not punish them if I could avoid it. And I feel like almost every educational setting where growth happens, this is my opinion, adults with knowledge and grace have success with students. That's what I'd say. Mm-hmm. And I learned that from him. I learned that from you. I mean, there are times when we snap. I mean, I will never get over Chris seeing me throw my glasses across the gymnasium in Indiana. Who does that? What's the point of throwing your glasses? You can't see. It's just anger. Like, I'm just angry that the boys I'm spending all my time with, learning to do certain things, won't do the things I'm asking. And I know I look like Chris Farley on a Saturday Night Live. And that's the way it was. Like, all of that stuff. Like, there are moments when you have those moments because you really want something to come out better. But I think in classrooms, teachers, if they can respect children and do the best they can with them, they almost always, this is my opinion, other teachers in the room might say that's crap. They most always read your honesty and sensibility as authentic. Children know when you're lying. They know when you're not being authentic. And I think the best parents and the best teachers try to do that with children. Not treat them like adults all the time necessarily, but to treat them with respect as human beings. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Get at it. But I really appreciate, John, you saying that to me early on in this process about chapter 6. I really do. I appreciate that. That was one of the chapters I had been hoping to write more about Dad, and I hadn't. I'd almost always written almost exclusively about loss, not about what the positive was with him. And I really did appreciate your comments on that. It meant a lot to me for you to write that to me.
Tom, I want to point out that you weren't the only coach from Indiana that threw something across the floor.
But just think of the
When you
theatrical.
said, who does that?
But just think of think of the theatrical impact of that. Like, that was iconic. I didn't throw a chair with some heft. I threw my reading glasses.
Something you needed.
Something you needed.
I couldn't see anything.
Oh, shoot.
Thank you, Doug.
Laura, your question, your top priority question for Tom.
By the way, can I say a word about you first?
Maybe.
We didn't clear this beforehand, but Dave Voisar's in the back room, other classmates, Angie Place is right there. Hi, Angie. When you came out of the room gym, remember the trophy case? And when we were sophomores and juniors, we saw the picture of you with the state championship trophy in that case. You remember that was there?
I do.
And I can't tell you how inspiring that was. Like, you were the first state champion in any sport at St. Mary's. And when I walked by that and I saw you in the picture as state champion in floor exercise, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
I thought I could be a state champion too. Of course, I couldn't, because it's really hard to win a state championship. Does anybody know how hard it is? Of course you do. You all know how hard it is. It's really hard to do, and I knew from those early moments of seeing your picture, and I knew you, of course, in church and at school, that you were really something.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that because I'm technically the consolation prize up here. After Doug being turned down by several people to hold this seat, I owed him a favor, so you got me, folks. But
True story. After I got turned down 4 times, I said, dang it, I'm asking somebody that will say yes, and immediately say yes.
Was it the title, you think? No.
no, I think you said people weren't comfortable being up here. And
Yeah, I think it's a hard ask to get people to come up and do what John and Laura are doing. So thank you
however,
for doing that.
I am super grateful for this experience because, I randomly but found your book at the Hallmark store in St. Mary's, The Education of Sam Sanders.
Yes,
And I don't know if any of you read that, but I loved that book. My degree is in education, K through 8, so that tells you how old I am because you can't do that anymore, right? But, I didn't become a teacher, and if we get to one of my questions, I'll tell you why. Yes, I did become a teacher, but it did not become my life's work. But anyways, I read that book, and I was like, oh, I love this book. So when Doug asked me, I did sort of say immediately yes. There was a little hesitation, but this has been a thrilling experience for me. And I wish I could have delved into things a little bit more, but I had a little bit of lack of time. But anyways, my question is also long. I don't even know if I have a question, so just listen. And,
I talked a lot tonight, so I'm happy to listen.
and then respond at some point. So I had the privilege of knowing the late, great Reverend Howard Petter, known to you as Dad.
Yeah.
Looking back, when I think of your dad, the words safe and warmth are what came to my mind. Even in my undeveloped 14-year-old brain, I knew Reverend Petter had created a true sanctuary at St. Paul's. And your sister Annie brought such great joy as well. Reverend Petter was my confirmation teacher in the 8th grade. But in 1974, during that year, is when he had his first heart attack. And so it was very shocking when our 8th grade class learned that, and Reverend Mextro stepped in and finished out our confirmation year. And I have to give a shout out to Amy Keller, who remembered all of that for me. So thanks, Amy. Then I began reading your book, and you used the word safe and connected to describe your dad. And I love this because everyone deserves this type of relationship with their dad or their parents, especially when your time was, so very short. A lot of your memories were also my memories. I didn't realize that until after, I read about them in your book. I didn't remember any of them. But the Saturday night TV lineup, and then the Sunday football, that was my dad and my thing. We only got to watch Pittsburgh Steelers. I grew up a Steelers fan, no longer. But anyways, that's all we could get living out there in the country. So in your book, and in your Zoom meeting, I watched that several times.
Thank you.
The launching of your book, you state life processes are about movement, not stasis. You go on to say visiting the past is not a lack of movement, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, Tom,
No, that's good.
but if you dwell in the nostalgic too long, how do you move forward?
Right.
You talk about your memories in such vivid detail, and it was lovely. And I am the opposite. And here's my example. These past couple months have caused me to explore the past. Unlocked a portal that's been locked and closed for a very long time. And so this has been talked about, so you know that I'm not bragging here, but in my very honor to be inducted into the Hall of Fame this coming Friday, the alumni committee was asking questions about my athletic career and my life. I couldn't answer them. I locked those experiences away. They've been locked away for a very, very long time. I've not drawn on them to help anybody. I had to research my own past, right? And it was a little difficult because a lot of you know we had a house fire in some year, 99 maybe, and all of that burned up. So we had to re-find it. But for some unknown reason, looking back on my childhood and my teen years, the only memories that stick, you use that word, are negative ones. Not because my childhood was bad, it was lovely, but mostly because I had the perception that I was always failing. And that was hard to think that you hadn't lived up to expectations over and over. So anyways, instead of dealing with these things, I locked it all away for many, many, many years. This journey, beginning with exploring my past and researching my past, it was very emotional. I've cried more in the last couple months than I probably have my entire life. And then reading your curriculum fragments in your book has created a new energy and excitement for me. It just all flowed together and couldn't have come at a better time. You go on to ask, how can reflection be something that helps us move forward? Memory work isn't about dwelling in the past. Well, I can't remember my past. I shut it all away. So I can't even remember if what I remember is right or if I perceived it, this way or that way. Yeah. So how would you help a student, in your curriculum studies to unlock that, even though it might be painful, to help them, move forward, help them to become better at what they're doing?
That's a really beautiful personal insight to you, Laura, and a great question. This is not flip, what I'm going to say. But you find a friend like Amy, and you find a friend like Doug and Rich, and you ask them to tell you what happened. Tell me everything you remember. And I think what will happen is there'll be things that pop. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I just feel like that is one method, like just a human method of not dredging up, resurrecting important insights and memories from the past that somehow you have left behind or done something with. I don't know what it was exactly. But I think people can tell you that maybe, especially if some of the other artifacts are not there, like a data point that you might use in a case study, like if you're doing a research project for me for a dissertation. What do you got? You got any data? That's what I'm asking. How are you going to get some more? One way to get it is to talk to people and interview, like almost interviewing them. Make them sit down over coffee and keep giving them coffee until they're like that. And write it down or tape record it and then talk about it some more. I think some things might pop. I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
There's something about talented people, and I mentioned regrets earlier, and you talked about not living up. So I was an athlete too, and I have great regrets about things that I didn't do or I didn't accomplish, of course. But all of the memories of those losses, I know. Like I am living with them right now. I am just as angry as I was in 1984. But you're not. There's something there. There's something about that that would be really interesting to uncover. You know, like, why do you feel like you didn't live up when you were state champion, the first ever? You know what I mean? Like, why? Why? What's that really about?
Well, you know, and this isn't about me, but
Sure.
anyways, you know, you come home from a state and you've only won one event. There was no hoopla. It wasn't in the yearbook. Nobody knew. My name didn't even get on the sign that was posted, you know, at the entrances to St.
That's
Mary's
right.
for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And so you continue to perceive, you know, to have that feeling of, oh gosh, I have let everybody down. And, you know, I had tools, I had love in my life. And so with your students, you know, and you even talk about it in your epilogue, and
Yeah.
I think in Loving as well. If I could, I loved this. Oh, I marked it, I'm sure.
If it's really good, read it out loud.
Okay. It is. It's really good, and I am going to read it out loud. Whatever the reason or the cause, how do children, let alone adults, come to terms personally and physically with the constant circle of acceptance and rejection that marks the human condition,
Yeah.
especially among the young, striving for acceptance and connection and, of course, love? And so, you know, there's so many people who don't have those tools or that love or whatever. And how do they walk, you know, how do they walk through that?
Yeah. Well, you obviously did it, and you have all those things still in your life. And I don't know that uncovering or unlocking those things will make, I don't know if they'll make any difference. You know, like, because like you are who you are who you are. And as great as you are and ever will be, like, there's no race to it, or there's no fault or anything if you don't get it out. Because I've probably blocked out quite a few things too, myself. I think we all have, probably, things that are extremely painful. I write about, I had to get out some things about being bullied in high school, and also acting like a bully myself in my own life, that were really hard to do, and I didn't tell the whole story. You know, like, there are certain things you can't say. Chris Petter has told me that several times. There's just certain things.
And in your book, you do take a dive into some, I don't want to say dark, but some negative things that occurred in your life. And that's got to be, you're exposing yourself to all of your readers and students and future students of, I did some things that, you know, maybe I'm not proud of, but maybe because I can identify those, I'm a better person, and I can teach you to be a better person for that.
I don't think many people will agree with what I'm going to say next. But I've made a decision. I made a decision tonight not to admit that I was nervous at the beginning. Did I appear nervous?
Nope.
I was really nervous. And my
Unless
kid,
fidgeting with that headset mic was
I
a
know,
sign of nerve.
it's not good. It's bad. My kids are so mad at me all the time. Dad, don't admit that you're nervous. And I'm like, I think one of the things that has helped me as a teacher is that I come off as Tom, Dr. Petter, I do that. I do it on purpose because I think that's who I am. But I also admit all the mistakes I've made to my students. And I admit the first night in every class, because first impressions are really important. I know you're as nervous as I am. I'm always nervous for the first class. And the students always go, because almost all of them are going to be teachers or some type of educational leader, and they all come into the room not feeling like they know enough, that they're not good enough. You know, like, it sounds like Saturday Night Live sketch again. Like, right? Remember the one? You're smart enough. You're good enough.
Yeah.
By golly, yeah. Okay. That you can do it, and if the faculty member or the coach or the pastor admits, I really struggle with that too sometimes. And honestly, not making it up. Like, honestly, I think that kind of honesty is really, really good, healthy human relationality. It's hard to come by, isn't it? But I get it all the time. And some people are not happy with me. My advisor said, "Why are you saying you're sorry all the time?" I'm like, "I'm sorry." And he said, don't apologize all the time." "Okay, I'm sorry." Like, I must have learned, I learned that somehow. It's something very deep within me about being apologetic. It may be because I'm blustery all the time. I have to back out of it. But I do think it's really important to admit that.
Grinder?
Those things.
Well, I waited until after I got done with my career before I told all my. I write about them now. Actually, you can read them in the Lima News on Wednesdays. You know, you guys touched on this. You kind of walked on this question a little bit. Thanks a lot, Laura.
I did not read your questions.
I think she was rubbernecking me there. No, I'm going to answer this anyway because there's a part at the end that I think will be revealing. There are, Tom, so many of your curriculum fragments that present you in various stages of development chronologically, from childhood all the way through your pandemic moments in 2020 and even beyond that. And in character formation, including those reflections when you weren't always presenting yourself in the most favorable light, such as your bullying of the girl on the swing back when you were in elementary school, throwing the wet Nerf balls at her. What I'd like to ask is, which of these reflections really did you find the most difficult to actually put pen to paper?
Yeah. Well, I named the character in Losing Jason. And so Jason was a friend in the neighborhood, and just after Dad passed, I write in the book about having what I would probably call a transforming moment of conviction. It was on the day of the wake of the burial, and I just had this sort of, I would probably call it a religious experience, like a sense of maybe some type of graceful divine presence assuring me it was okay, what was happening. And soon after that, I had that incident with Jason in my driveway when we were playing one-on-one basketball, and I lost that friend over that.
Yeah.
You know, that, your question was, what was it? Say it again.
Which was the most difficult? Because there are several in the book where, Tom, you really have to kind of peel back a lot of layers to, you know, really expose yourself like that.
It was hard to write that story because we weren't friends after that, and I really regretted that. And I never could make it up to him, and I don't think it ever would have mattered. And it seems like a small thing, like two kids playing basketball who fight over a ball, and it winds up ruining your friendship. But I've held on to that memory for so long, especially and I'm sure I repeated this many times in McBroom Gym, and probably the same feeling I had of being like mad about everything that was happening to me, and then mad about probably losing that one-on-one game in my driveway, diving for the ball and skimming myself into that puddle and latching onto it with the same force as my friend, and having the ball fly out of our hands into Schultz's yard. I went over the fence to get the ball, and Jason was gone that fast. Like, that is a really powerful metaphor for everything falling to pieces and losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was hard to write.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to talk about now, but it's hard to write. I wish it had never happened. I can't get it back. But it has shaped me. Like, when I'm getting ready, now to dive in. You've seen me when this is a metaphor. When I'm getting ready to dive, I'm not going over the edge, but when I'm getting ready to dive into the next thing, I really am somewhat careful about what I'm doing, what I'm grabbing for, what I'm trying to get out of it, who I would hurt, etc. I think that's helped me a lot in my life.
I'm going to piggyback onto the Grinder's question and your answer, and it's really good, so I'm going to read it. I'm going to read what you wrote.
I'd love that.
And I'm taking a totally different angle with this, and I'm going to just kind of set it up and let you talk about it a little bit, Tom. And then my top priority question I'll ask at the very end is going to have a nexus to this right here. So pages 46, 47 in Tom's chapter, Losing. I don't remember how this event came about at this point, but I'm sure that it happened in that typical sort of in passing, no big deal way that young boys, even back then, planned things. No phone calls, just a passing word in the cafeteria or school hallway. Probably about playing and where to be at and what time. We played on the parsonage driveway on my dear beloved court, which we had to abandon by June to make way for a remodeling project before a new pastor would be hired and moved in by the fall. Dad died in late November 1976. We were removed from the parsonage by June 1977. Cold, hard endings all around, and loss after loss seemingly at the time. I found out quickly that the court was never really mine.
That made me cry.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Look at that beautiful court. So, isn't that beautiful? That was mine, right? So Mr. Schultz saw me. I was maybe 10, 11. I convinced Dad, but they had built that carport on. That wasn't a sealed-in garage. It was a carport that was open. And they had put that up on vacation. They did it when we were away because they knew Carl would be so angry if he knew ahead of time, he still was angry, that they were going to put a carport over that basketball court because that was all open. Remember, Benny? Joe, do you remember that? The whole thing was open. It was a beautiful court with a beautiful long net goal. I call them long net goals, remember?
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And when we got home, it was a carport, not a basketball court. We needed that. We did. We needed it. We needed that room remodeled, so we had a place to watch TV. The house was not very good for the 6 people in it. It was better after this. But I went out with the ladder. I had convinced Dad that I was going to put the old hoop up on that structure. And I couldn't lift it or anything. And I had the ladder out, and I was doing things, getting ready to do it. And Mr. Schultz came over, Hall of Famer, this weekend.
Inducted Friday.
Howard was so kind and gentle. He said, "Tommy, what are you doing?" Of course, he was a builder, right? An engineer too, right? And a World War hero. "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm putting up this goal, Mr. Schultz, because we lost our basketball court." And he said, "Well, let me help you." And he got his own ladder and real tools, and he built the basketball court that afternoon in like an hour. Of course, it was easy to do. He made 2 metal stanchions and attached it with nuts and bolts. And Buddy, you played on that a lot, right? Wasn't that a great hoop? It was solid. So you could shoot bank shots from the kitchen and bank shots from their fence. There was a vine fence there. But that, and Mr. Brenneman lived right here, and I showed off for him in that driveway, hoping he'd notice me. It was a beautiful, beautiful place, but it was not mine. And I learned that, like the finality of death also comes with the movement of society and family and the rules of the game. Right? That wasn't our house. It was the church's house. We had to get out of that house. I never thought of it that way. I'd lived in there my whole life. I just never thought of it.
And I just heard the grinder say one of the most poignant parts of the book. And
Made a crusty old guy like me cry too. It was so very well written.
And again, I want to use that later for my top priority question. How do you relate with educators and kids that they get, the transient students, those that are moving maybe within the school district, but from one family to another family, that they don't really have that's mine. This is my home.
Yeah. Ever. Right. Sometimes ever. Like even have that long feeling I had that was my place. I still feel that way about that place, actually. It's not mine, but
That's your place.
Yeah, I had some ownership of it, in my head at least. No, I think that children really suffer a lot. So nobody ever thought of us as a single family household. Really. I never heard that when we were talking about the pet. We were okay. We didn't have any mental health counseling, which we desperately needed. We needed family therapy. We never got it. And, it is kind of funny. But yeah, I think if we had had some help, we might have. I might have worked through some of that stuff about the fact that we didn't have a home anymore. And the new place that we had probably would be temporary until, and some of you know in the room how generous Gail and Cisco was about selling us this house in 77, 78. And Galen doesn't like to hear that because he doesn't want people to say things like that about him, but that was one of the most generous things that anybody's ever done for us. It's probably the most generous thing. Because of course, Mark knows this, it was a great place to live, wasn't it? Cisco's house? I mean, it was just a beautiful location. It was right by the pool. I spent all my waking hours figuring out when Chris Cook would be at the pool lifeguarding. And I was I'm sorry, the Cooks know this. I was on that court playing basketball, trying to get her attention. She never noticed, but it was a great place to live.
Well, thanks for sharing that part of the book and all the parts of the book. But yeah, I mean, that one just, it struck. It stuck, Tom. That was a sticky note right there.
Appreciate that.
Laura, what other sticky things do you have for Tom?
Well, I wanted to say, as I was reading, we're not that far apart in age, and being a teenager when your father passed, and feeling like, oh my gosh, did I ever even reach out to Tom? Did I ever try to help or say I'm sorry? You're beating your own self up because you're like, I don't know, you're living in your own world, I think, at that age, and you don't perceive what you were going through.
Kids don't know what to say to each other. That's the hard thing. Yeah. I never had any expectations that anybody would say anything. And I had plenty of people in my life. I've mentioned this to so many of you probably in the room, that I had great mentors and friends and colleagues from church and school. There's tremendous people that helped me. And you know who you are. You're looking at me now. You know who you are. Really great people who helped fill that void.
And I have one more
So
thing
you're
to
off the
say.
hook. I'm not
Thank you.
upset.
No, I'm not off
You're
the
a state champion.
hook.
I just want to talk to you.
Oh, sorry. And then your episode with Jason, I felt like you were so very hard on yourself over that, because I'm like, something was going on with Jason too. It wasn't, it was a dual whatever happened there. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate that. That's kind.
Laura, do you have another follow-up question, or?
No, not really, but I have I just have an observation. So as you know, or Doug stated, I'm in the insurance business, which is sometimes about education for anybody that will listen, and not many will. But in reading this book, it's just not educative for educators. There were many things that you have in there that I try and apply in my line of work. This book, you guys, if you haven't bought it, you should. because it really is a great teaching about life and how to handle things, through your own self-exploration. But, things I use in my work is, okay, somebody's telling me something, and I have a story, not from way back when, but something recent, because I can't remember way back when, but I'm like, can I tell that story? And these are questions Tom has in his book, or you talked about in your launch. And I'm like, okay, can I go there? Can I help make this relatable to this person if I tell this story? What will they think about me if I tell this story? Maybe it's not a good story, but it will help lead them to what I need to have them understand. Does the story have potential to do harm? Not just to me, but to the adjacent person. So you're thinking about all these things all the time as you're in front of people, because in my line of work, and where's Joe? I saw Joe out there. Yeah, or Joe. And Joe and Robbie can relate to this. You're constantly having to change your hats. You're dealing with this person who's had a loved one pass away, and you're dealing with the life insurance aspect. They leave, and the next person you're dealing with, because their insurance raised a nickel a month. So you've got to make that quick switch, because both are equally important to them, maybe not to us, but to them it's equally important. So any way that we can use your curriculum fragments to help these folks understand and make things more relatable, I think this book is awesome for anybody in any line of work. You can read and you can apply what Tom has written to your job, to anything, honestly.
Yep.
So there's no question there, I don't think,
lovely,
but just an
actually.
observation.
I wish you'd call a major publisher and tell them that. And change
I
the
will
title.
be happy to, but they're not going to listen
Change
to
the
me.
title.
Just change the title. No, Chris wants a lake house. I can't get her a lake house because I can't sell a big book. But she'd love that if Simon & Schuster wanted, a book entitled X that could help people. Like, I've always felt like when I was writing this work in particular, that it was about education, and it could be helpful for people who were doing educational research in this vein, and or thinking about educational topics and approaches and ideas and possibilities in the curriculum. That's probably its main audience, but I think it could have a bigger audience. It's just that I'm fulfilling a personal and professional role in a way that isn't lucrative and isn't, sellable. It's not monetizable. But I think I'm onto something. And I hope people read it. I think one of the things I want to say back to you, but all three of you, especially Doug in particular, and everybody in the audience, is that this has been my life's work. It's the thing I was meant to do, actually. I thought I was going to be a basketball coach. I thought I was going to be a pastor. I thought I'd be a school teacher. I thought I'd be all these things, but I think I was meant to be a professor and a writer. And to have people show up at a meeting like this, remember, Doug, I'm like, I think 10 people might come. And all of you came out, and that really means a lot to me. And to actually get to talk about the work and think about it as something that is translatable to people, and people who cared about our family and or education and or St. Mary's. If they read it, you're going to see, I think you'll see yourself in the book.
I agree with what you just stated there and what Laura was doing the pitch for Simon & Schuster, that the title is going to throw people off that aren't in the biz, right?
Right. It's like, this is really hot in my business. I had to make a choice.
Yeah.
This is really important. Like, I think people are starting to talk about curriculum fragments being a research methodology in education that people could start using. That is a translation and a next step from Carrere, which is a really important thing, but it's in my little tiny slice of a world. So when Mark and I go to the baseball game next week, he's not like, hey, tell me some more about Carrere. It's not in his world.
However,
We have a different world.
however, the book allows you to become unbeknownst to yourself in Carrere,
Yeah,
right?
well put.
Because you're reading, and your writing style is phenomenal. Kudos to Mr. Grindrod.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, you're reading and you're thinking about your own fragments. And that's the marking of an excellent book. That is the marking of, I want more of this. And so somehow you package that. Maybe getting past 1 and 2 was a little difficult for me, but
Yeah.
boy, 3 through 9, couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
And absolutely love that. And those of you that have already read it, I think you'll agree. And those who are going to read this are probably going to be in agreement as well. But you are going to be Carrere because you're going to be doing your own self-reflection, an extremely important role that we all need to do internally.
Do the panelists have a fragment that's occurred to them after they read? Like something that's sticky to you that you want to work on?
We're supposed to be asking the questions.
That's really good. Doug and I often have these moments where he goes to school. I'm asking you a question.
So, yeah, and it more evolved today than anything, and it was really because of seeing Mr. Griffin. And Griff, I'm sure you don't remember this at all. And from reading the book and seeing Mr. Griffin and this fragment that became uncovered of, don't be a punk kid is really what my story is about, because that's what Griff told me. About 2 weeks before my high school graduation, my dad wanted me to spend a week with him in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks before vacation, or before
Right.
high school graduation, he was going on a Midwest trip. I'm like, I'm not going. I'm spending the last 2 weeks in high school with my friends and, doing the senioritis fun things. And it was in Tom Yingling's accounting class, all of a sudden I get from Mr. Griffin. And it wasn't a conversation, a two-way conversation. He's like, you're going with your dad to Washington, D.C. Quit being a punk kid. I had the greatest time with my dad
Yeah.
in Washington, D.C., and want so many more of those trips back. And Griff, thanks, because my mom wasn't getting through, and Dad was just like, well, if you don't want to go, you don't want to go. But you didn't even give me a choice. You just said, you're going.
That's a great fragment.
And I think in that reflection, we need to step back. What is truly important?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Why am I being a punk kid? And what is truly important? And boy, that was just one amazing week.
You and I
there.
both had similar experiences with Mr. Griffin being a trusted adult presence in our life who could say things to us directly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think children becoming adults need that too. So educators like him are not a dime a
Yeah.
dozen.
And with parents, you could always, it was
Yeah,
just.
yeah.
I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut and went to D.C.
That's a great story.
I think a lot of my curriculum fragments actually started before I read your book.
Yeah.
Because I write about them.
Right. You're
Yeah.
doing it.
When I first got involved with newspaper writing, my niche was the voice from the classroom. I actually started doing it while I was still teaching. As a matter of fact, Mary Ellen Miller, the librarian, would come running down with the columns each time. And I'd tell her, I said, Mary Ellen, I get the paper. Plus,
I love that.
I wrote the thing. Okay? but she was just being nice. She brought down all these clippings, and I even used some of them in class.
Yep.
But after having read your book, I just got this, for some reason, and I hadn't done this for quite some time, but after I finished reading the chapters, I began to dream about school on a unbelievably regular basis. I mean, we're talking about at least once a week.
Huh.
And I think that, probably would be a direct reflection that, how much I enjoyed the book, is that it brought up so many of these curriculum fragments that I experienced with people like you and so many others. Dave Boyshert, who's in the back of the room, who gives us the money downs on football Fridays. But, so I think probably those would be the greatest curriculum fragments for me, is what the book stimulated from my own past.
I'd love to talk about the dreams with you maybe afterward.
And you did give me the greatest moment I ever had with Thurber in the class.
Beautiful.
The sheer joy of reading. Yep.
I'm just going to say that these past couple months, like I stated earlier, have been very emotional because I've had to explore and open and what have you. And so what the grinder said, reading the book has opened many, many doors to curriculum fragments for myself. I won't share any of them, but it's been a blessing.
Glad. Thank you for reading.
And if this book really does take off, we would like a lake house as well.
At least a barbecue.
At least actually, yes.
So, Grinder, do you have a last question to
Yes,
ask Tom?
I do. I want to bring up one of the things that really impressed me from the beginning of the book, and it was during a walk across campus, on the campus I know so well, my
Beautiful
undergrad
Miami.
years, wonderful experiences at Miami, at least the years I can remember, 2 out of the 4. I was misbehaving a lot as a young man. But anyway, in the Buckeye Gathering curriculum fragment that you mentioned that you passed the collected nuts that were out there as you were walking to your building there, and you began picking them up and putting them in your pocket and everything, and eventually you handed those nuts out to your friends that you thought at the time needed maybe some better luck or something.
Yeah.
And I thought what was very interesting, Tom, and what really was quite good in terms of the kind of descriptive detail that good writing is all about, is that you even gave away the ones that had some cracks in them, feeling that, and this is a beautiful metaphor, that certainly we as individuals have our own cracks. So why, would you not represent that by giving these tokens away? And I guess my question is, do you still look for Buckeye nuts as you cross campus?
I always, yes, because we have a Buckeye tree outside of McGuffey Hall. It's a horse chestnut tree, as you all know. And it's giving them now. And they fall in the little seed holder thingies, and they don't always appear. You have to step on them sometimes. But they're beautiful. If you've ever picked one up yourself, they're just gorgeous creations. And they're almost always these cracked because you probably stepped on it. And I think they're the most beautiful ones. They're symbolic of a time when I lost something that I thought I really, really wanted. And it was a job. I had a job that I really loved, and I was building something really good, I thought, and I got fired. And I don't use the word fired in the book. It sounds like I was a loser, like I got fired. But I think probably everybody's been fired from something. Really took it pretty hard. And I got some relief because the things, I was referring to this earlier, the things that I got to do because I wasn't doing that are the things I was meant to do. And when I'm looking back at that, I'm not filled with regret. I'm not filled with thanks either, because I didn't like getting fired. But I'm filled with Well, actually, I think it's probably joy that it worked out that way. I probably had something to do with it. I kept my head down and kept working. But there was some luck there, some really good, wonderful luck that happened. I got to do the things I was probably meant to do because I wasn't stuck in that position. Almost all of us have a story like that. I decided to tell it because the things that happened out of that were the things that led to this and the things that led to that. And that never would have happened if I hadn't been looking for Buckeyes under the tree that day.
I'm going to my favorite chapter.
Okay. Chapter 7.
0 really to deal with St. Mary's, Ohio.
I know. That's kind of weird.
Very weird.
For you.
Very weird. And Tom, I got to say, I love short stories because that's about all my attention span can take, right? Love Isaac Asimov's The Fun They Had. A progressive to the regressive story.
Mm-hmm.
You create, sorry to throw you under the bus here, out of failure in the classroom to connect with your students.
Yeah.
An unbelievable regressive to progressive allegory on the trail of tears with a short story. I am 100% sincere that every literature book, history class, teaching ethics, that life and death at Talawanda Ridge should be incorporated into. If you only buy the book for one thing and to read the life and death at Talawanda Ridge, it's worth the $30. By the way, if you don't want to spend the $30 on the book, you can order it online. I think the discounted price right now is $136.95.
That's true. I can explain that, but that's ugly.
It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece, a beautiful connector. I previously talked about when you discerned that basketball court wasn't yours and you were displaced. Did you ever try to make that connection with the Trail of Tears when you were teaching? And then how did you come up with the progressive allegory, Life and Death at Talawanda Ridge? Again, so beautifully, eloquently written. And, I mean, you may think you went off the deep end, but we're going to Mars, folks. And it's in Life and Death at Talawanda Ridge. So I've teed it up for you to just kind of run with, but the one question I do have on this is, second question. First is, how did you come up with the progressive allegory? And the second, did you do this in one take?
Did I write the story in one take?
Yep.
Yes.
I would have bet a lot of money.
Because fiction, so I was experimenting with fiction as a method for attacking the standardization movement and the curriculum in schools in the early 2000s that really took hold, and we're still dealing with it. The teachers that I had at Bunker Hill weren't in that. I think they were able to respond to us in ways that a lot of teachers can't do right now and may not be in the future if we don't fix this a bit. But the writing fiction is not easy. I didn't have much experience with it, but I knew if I had enough in my mind about where I was going, that I could, if I had long sittings, that I could write the fiction. That was my method, my process, but it's hard, and I don't spend much time doing it because it takes a lot out of me. But I really appreciate your insight about displacement. But I have to be really careful about sort of equating a personal displacement with the Trail of Tears. I mean, that's about genocide. So I mean like that. But I think there's something to the metaphor of displacement that is always in play with all of us.
Sure.
And so it starts with a seed of feeling displaced by my students who couldn't get anything out of the literature we were reading about the feeling of losing. I couldn't get the students to open up about anything that they felt was unjust or unbeautiful. That was the point of the Trail of Tears poem. And I thought it was my duty, because you've taught literature, to teach it well by having the students interact with the deep themes in it, by theming through it themselves. Like they need to write through it too, or write something about it that shows that they can understand the deep conceptual nature of what's at hand. Is that what we do?
Yeah.
I couldn't get that done. Couldn't get anything out of them. They were evaporating right in front of me. Didn't understand what I was asking, didn't like my examples, and I lost the battle with them and made a story out of what I hoped the students who had that class with me could see in the future if I could will it so. And I still think about those students and wonder what they're doing. And if when the next thing comes that makes them have to be empathetic or kind or generous, if they are. Because I think that's what's at stake when you're teaching literature. Are the themes in the book resonating with the lives of the students who are consuming it? And can they talk about it and or live it out in the future? Why do we have education in the first place? It can't be just vocational or just to learn things. It has to be to become, this is my opinion, a person who is living in the world, in society, and making it better, or somehow understanding the complexity of it and dealing with it on a daily basis. That's what we want the people in the room to be doing. Like, I want to be able to walk with Mike J and ask him a hard question and have him give me a deep answer. That happens all the time, doesn't it, Mike? Has to happen. Has to happen all the time. Or then we don't have anything. We just have a bunch of people bopping around a small city. I don't know what the point of that is. I mean, you could have a nice place to live. It could be a really beautiful place in the world. This is a beautiful part of the world. We fought hard for it and displaced others to get it. Like, this is beautiful. We love it here. But what if we're not talking about things that matter together all the time and making progress or a difference? I mean, I think I might have gone off the rails there, but I think it's what the point of the literature is, and what the point is of that chapter, which is when we're teaching, we're hoping for more out of our students than they sometimes can give, and that we get, and that we're really, I think some of us are really working hard to get to the next thing, to the next step with students in terms of understanding.
And I think you just summed up the whole point of curriculum fragments.
Appreciate that. I've been working on it a long time.
Yeah. You should write a book about it. Yeah. We are drawing to a close. Any last questions, thoughts for Tom?
I think we covered it.
We did.
Just a tremendous job. I hope you all buy
It's
the
a lovely
book.
audience. What a beautiful audience, too. Thank you for coming out.
Absolutely.
And Tom mentioned planting seeds, and this night is really a seed.
Yeah.
And as you look at the screen, folks, I don't want to be done. I think we have a lot of local authors that we can draw from, and this is just a short list. This was the list I thought of when Tom first came up with the idea. Sarah Barrelsman, which would be Walt and Marcia Mangin. Joe Ginner, we plugged Ditchman, so please get your tickets for that. Linda Stroh is being inducted into the Hall of Fame ceremony Friday as well. And I'm 3/4 of the way through Trust Rules. Could be one of you right now looking in the mirror of, you know what, maybe I could write. I was explaining this to the librarian, and unbeknownst to me, we have a whole local author section in the library. And that book right there by Linda Wagner 1954 grad. I don't know if anybody knows Linda Wagner.
55 books.
She has a lot of books. A lot of books. Rick and Penny Kogi's daughter, Erica, has a novel that's in here. I mean, this is pretty impressive in things that I had no idea. There's a book that's going to end right here with John Andreoni that I had no idea. There's Chris Botkin's collection right there. There was Erica's book, and then John Andreoni, St. Clair's Gold. Was anybody familiar that? I just knew that he did the For the Birds section. Quite impressive. And Tom, thanks for planting the seed. Thanks for the title, St. Mary Celebrates, as we should, education, writing, and the power of stories. And we have some amazing stories here. Well, we have come to the end of St. Mary Celebrates, education, writing, and the power of stories. It is our hope that the event did educate, enlighten, entertain, and elevate your perspective about St. Mary's, Ohio. We do truly hope that a story has been told that augments the development of relationships, old and new, to promote growth for all who do, did, and will call St. Mary's home. Once again, thank you, Laura and John, for your willingness to be on the panel and your expertise and your insight. And thank you, Dr. Tom Petter, for your love of life, St. Mary's, and education.
Thank you, Dad. Thanks, everybody. That's lovely.
And for creating this wonderful concept that hopefully will be a decade into the making. If you didn't get your book, it's out there on the table next to the concession stand. Hopefully there's going to be somebody there to sell them to you. Purchase that book. Take your own deep dive into Tom's reflections and then yours. And see if humanity can create a joyful, beautiful, and just curriculum of life. Consequently, creating a better world built on love. We need it, don't we? We need it.
Absolutely.
I hope you think positively about our town, the town we did not inherit from our ancestors, but the one we borrowed from our grandchildren. Peace to you all, always and always. Thank you and have a good night.
I'll be outside signing if anybody wants to.
Thanks for watching another episode of Writer Nation Station. Help us help you by subscribing on YouTube or following us on Facebook.